German Shepherd was shaking beside a busy road. What Baby did next left. Everyone in tears. The moment 5-year-old Marcus Thompson pressed his small hand against the car window, everything changed. What happened next will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about the connection between children and animals. Before we begin this incredible true story, hit that like button, share with someone who needs to hear this, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The rain hadn't stopped for 3 hours. Sarah Thompson gripped the steering wheel tighter as another 18-wheeler roared past their small sedan, sending a wave of water crashing against the windshield. Traffic on Highway 47 had slowed to a crawl, brake lights stretching endlessly ahead like a river of red stars in the gray afternoon. "Mommy, my tummy feels weird," Marcus said from his booster seat, his voice barely audible over the drumming rain. Sarah glanced in the rearview mirror at her son. His usually bright brown eyes looked troubled, almost distant. "We'll be home soon, sweetheart." Just 20 more minutes, but Marcus wasn't looking at her. His gaze was fixed on something outside, his small hand pressed flat against the cold window glass. His breathing had changed, becoming shallow and quick. "Mommy, stop the car." "Marcus, honey, we're in the middle of traffic. I can't just—" "Stop the car!" The scream that tore from Marcus's throat was unlike anything Sarah had ever heard from her son. It wasn't a tantrum or a demand. It was pure, raw panic. Sarah's heart jumped into her throat. "Marcus, what's wrong? Are you hurt?" "The dog, Mommy. The dog needs us. She's so scared. She's so scared. She's—" Marcus's words dissolved into sobs, his whole body shaking as if he could feel something invisible to everyone else. Sarah frantically scanned the roadside through the rain-blurred windows. At first, she saw nothing but concrete barriers and the occasional piece of trash whipping in the wind. Then, through a brief break in the downpour, she spotted it. A German Shepherd, pressed against the guardrail about 50 yards ahead. The dog was soaked to the bone, its body trembling violently. Even from this distance, Sarah could see something was wrong. The way it held itself, the way its head hung low, the way it flinched every time a vehicle passed. "Marcus, I see the dog, but we can't stop here. It's too dangerous, the traffic." "She's hurt." Marcus was pulling at his seatbelt now, tears streaming down his face. "She's hurt, and she's looking for someone, and she can't find them, and she's so scared she wants to die." The specificity of his words sent a chill down Sarah's spine. How could he know that? How could he possibly know what the dog was feeling from inside a moving car? "Please, Mommy, please," Marcus's voice cracked. "I can feel it. I can feel how scared she is. It's like when I had that bad dream about drowning, but worse. She thinks no one will help her. She thinks she's all alone." Sarah's hands trembled on the wheel. Her son had always been sensitive, unusually perceptive for his age. There had been incidents before, knowing when his grandmother was sick before she called, crying when their neighbor's cat died before anyone told him. But this was different. This was immediate and overwhelming. "Okay," she heard herself saying. "Okay, baby. There's an emergency pull-off in about a quarter mile. I'll stop there." Those 3 minutes felt like hours. Marcus never took his eyes off the dog, whispering things Sarah couldn't quite hear. When she finally pulled into the emergency lane and turned on her hazard lights, Marcus was out of his seatbelt before the car fully stopped. "Marcus, no! You stay in the car. It's too dangerous." But her son was already pushing against the door. "She won't hurt me, Mommy. She's not mean. She's just scared and hurt, and she misses someone so much it makes her chest hurt." Sarah grabbed Marcus's arm before he could exit. "We do this together, understand? You hold my hand the entire time." They stepped out into the rain, immediately soaked. The wind tried to push them back, and the sound of traffic was deafening. Sarah kept a death grip on Marcus's hand as they carefully made their way along the narrow shoulder. The German Shepherd saw them coming. Sarah expected it to run, or growl, or show some sign of aggression. Instead, the dog pressed itself harder against the guardrail, as if trying to disappear into the metal. "Stop here, Mommy," Marcus said when they were still about 10 feet away. He pulled free from her grasp before she could react. "Marcus!" But something extraordinary happened. The moment Marcus took a step forward alone, the dog's demeanor changed. Its ears, which had been flat against its skull, perked up slightly. The trembling lessened. Marcus dropped to his knees on the wet asphalt, completely ignoring the rain and the danger. He didn't reach out. He didn't move closer. He just knelt there, looking at the dog, and said something so quiet that Sarah couldn't hear it over the traffic. The German Shepherd took a tentative step forward. Marcus remained perfectly still, rain running down his face, his Spider-Man jacket soaked through. He spoke again, still too quiet to hear. The dog took another step, then another. By now, several cars had slowed even more, drivers craning their necks to see what was happening. A man in a pickup truck had pulled over behind Sarah's car, stepping out with his phone raised, recording. The German Shepherd was close enough now that Sarah could see the details. Female, probably 3 or 4 years old. No collar, but there was a mark around her neck where one had been. Her ribs showed through her wet fur, and there was a gash on her right shoulder, not fresh, but not fully healed either. The dog stopped just out of Marcus's reach, her brown eyes locked on his face. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Marcus slowly, so slowly, extended his hand palm up. "Storm," he said, loud enough for Sarah to hear this time. "Your name is Storm, isn't it?" The dog's reaction was immediate and shocking. Her tail, which had been tucked between her legs, gave a single weak wag. A sound escaped her throat. Not quite a whine, not quite a bark, but something in between. Like recognition, like relief, like a question and answer all at once. Storm closed the distance and pressed her head into Marcus's small hands. Sarah's vision blurred with tears. She didn't realize she was crying. Behind her, she heard the man with the phone say, "Are you seeing this? This kid just..." How did he know the dog's name? Marcus wrapped his arms around Storm's neck, and the dog, this traumatized, terrified animal that should have been aggressive or at least defensive, melted into him. Her body stopped shaking. Her breathing slowed. "We need to help her, Mommy," Marcus said, looking up at Sarah with those earnest brown eyes. "She's looking for someone who loved her. But something bad happened, and now she can't find them, and she doesn't understand why." Sarah knelt beside them, her hand tentatively reaching out to touch Storm's wet fur. The dog didn't flinch, seemingly accepting that anyone Marcus trusted was safe. "How do you know her name?" Sarah asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to hear the answer. Marcus looked confused by the question. "She told me. Not with words, but I just know. Like how I know when you're sad, even when you're smiling. Or how I knew Grandma fell before she called us." The man with the phone had come closer, keeping a respectful distance, but close enough to hear. "Ma'am, I'm Tom Bradley. I'm a paramedic, off duty. That dog needs medical attention. There's an emergency vet clinic about 2 miles from here. I can call ahead if you want." Sarah nodded, grateful for practical action in the face of something she couldn't explain. "Yes, please, thank you." As Tom made the call, Sarah tried to coax Storm toward the car, but the dog wouldn't move unless Marcus moved first. It was as if an invisible thread connected them, and where the boy went, the dog followed. "She's scared of cars," Marcus said suddenly. "That's how she got hurt. A car hit her when she was trying to find her way home. But she doesn't know that her home isn't there anymore." Sarah's skin prickled. "Marcus, how could you possibly know that?" Her son looked up at her with those 2 wise eyes. "The same way I know you're scared right now. I just feel it." They managed to get Storm into the back seat, Marcus climbing in beside her, his small hand never leaving her fur. The dog lay her head in his lap, and for the first time since they'd spotted her, she closed her eyes. Tom followed them to the veterinary clinic, still recording, though Sarah wasn't sure how she felt about that. This was private, intimate, inexplicable. But then again, maybe the world needed to see that. Sometimes miracles came in the form of a 5-year-old boy who could feel what others couldn't. Dr. James Rivera was waiting for them at the emergency entrance, having been briefed by Tom's call. He was a tall man, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and he approached slowly, clearly experienced with traumatized animals. "Let's get her inside," he said gently. But when he reached for Storm, she pressed closer to Marcus, a low whine escaping her throat. "It's okay," Marcus whispered to her. "He's going to help you feel better." "I'll be right here. I promise I won't leave." The examination room was bright and sterile, a stark contrast to the gray chaos of the highway. Dr. Rivera worked efficiently, checking Storm's injuries, taking her temperature, examining her eyes and ears. Through it all, Marcus stood at her head, his small hand stroking her fur, whispering things only she could hear. "She's malnourished, dehydrated, and has an infected wound on her shoulder," Dr. Rivera reported. "But what concerns me most is her emotional state. She's showing signs of severe trauma. The fact that she's letting us examine her at all is unusual." "It's because of Marcus," Sarah said. "She trusts him." Dr. Rivera glanced at the boy, who was now pressing his forehead against Storm's, both of them with their eyes closed. "I've seen therapy dogs, service animals, even police dogs, but I've never seen a connection form this quickly. It's like they've known each other for years." "Can you check for a microchip?" Sarah asked, though part of her dreaded what they might find. Dr. Rivera ran the scanner over Storm's shoulder blades. It beeped. "She's chipped," he confirmed, moving to his computer. "Let me pull up the information." The room fell silent except for the clicking of keys and Storm's steady breathing. Marcus hadn't moved, hadn't opened his eyes, but Sarah noticed tears sliding down his cheeks. "The chip is registered to a Robert Chen, Doctor," Rivera said slowly, his expression growing troubled. "Address is 427 Willowbrook Lane, but—" He turned his monitor so Sarah could see. "This is strange. There's a note in the system. Robert Chen was reported missing 3 months ago." Sarah's blood ran cold. Missing? According to this, he disappeared without a trace. His car was found abandoned at a rest stop 50 miles from here. No signs of struggle, no note, just gone. The police have been looking for him. Marcus's eyes snapped open. He didn't want to leave her. Everyone turned to look at the boy. "He didn't want to leave Storm," Marcus repeated, his voice strange, older somehow. "He loved her more than anything. She was all he had after." Marcus paused, his face scrunching up as if he was trying to grasp something just out of reach. After someone went away, someone important. Storm helped him not be so sad. "Marcus," Sarah said carefully, "are you making this up?" Her son shook his head violently. "No, I can see it. Not see it with my eyes, but see it in here." He tapped his chest. "Storm shows me, like pictures but made of feelings. Mr. Chen used to sing to her, a song about the moon, and he'd give her ice cubes on hot days because she liked to crunch them. And there's a blue blanket that smells like him, that she misses so much it hurts." Dr. Rivera had gone very still. "Mrs. Thompson, has Marcus ever met Robert Chen?" "No, never. We don't even live in that neighborhood. We've never been to Willowbrook Lane." Tom, who had been quietly standing in the corner, still recording, spoke up. "I think you should call the police, if the kid knows things about a missing person." But Marcus wasn't done. His face had gone pale, and he was gripping Storm's fur tighter. "Something's wrong. Something's really wrong. Mr. Chen he's stuck somewhere dark and cold, and he can't get out, and he's been calling for Storm, but she couldn't find him." And Marcus suddenly doubled over as if in pain, a strangled cry escaping his throat. Storm immediately struggled to stand, despite her weakness, pressing against the boy, whimpering. "Marcus!" Sarah rushed to her son, pulling him into her arms. "What's wrong? What's happening?" "It hurts," Marcus gasped. "He's so thirsty and hungry and scared, and no one can hear him, and he thinks he's going to die there and never see Storm again. And, Mrs. Thompson, I think we should take Marcus to the emergency room, Doctor," Rivera said, reaching for his phone. "No!" Marcus pulled away from Sarah, his eyes wild. "We have to find him. Storm knows where he is. She just couldn't get there by herself. Please, Mommy, please! He's running out of time." Sarah looked helplessly at Doctor Rivera, then at Tom, then back at her son. Everything logical, everything rational told her this was impossible. Marcus couldn't know these things. He was 5 years old. He was probably in shock from the emotional intensity of rescuing the dog. He needed medical attention, not to go searching for a missing person based on feelings and impossible knowledge. But then she looked at Storm, who was now standing despite her injuries, her eyes fixed on Marcus with an intensity that seemed almost human. The dog took a limping step toward the door, then looked back at Marcus, whining. "She knows," Marcus said, his voice steadier now, but tears still streaming. "She's been trying to get back to him for weeks, but she got lost and hurt, and no one would help her. Everyone just drove past. But she never stopped trying." Tom lowered his phone. "Look, I've been a paramedic for 15 years. I've seen things that don't make sense, things that shouldn't be possible. If there's even a chance someone's in danger." Dr. Rivera moved to his desk. "I'm calling Detective Maria Santos. She's handling the Chen case. Let her decide what to do with this information." While he made the call, Sarah held Marcus, who was trembling now, his connection to whatever he was feeling, clearly taking a physical toll. Storm had positioned herself, so she was touching both of them, her body a bridge between boy and mother. "The basement," Marcus whispered suddenly. "He's in a basement. But not a normal basement. It's like a room that got forgotten. Behind something. Behind a wall? No, a door. A door that looks like a wall." Sarah's phone buzzed. It was David, her husband, texting to ask if they were okay, why they weren't home yet. She didn't even know how to begin explaining. Dr. Rivera hung up. "Detective Santos is on her way. She said she'll be here in 10 minutes. She seemed very interested when I mentioned the boy knew things about Chen that weren't public knowledge." "What things?" Sarah asked. "The song about the moon." Robert Chen was a music teacher. He wrote a song called Luna's Lullaby for his daughter before she died of leukemia 2 years ago. Storm was her dog first. And the blue blanket, that was listed in the missing person report as something taken from his home, though they never understood why someone would steal a dog blanket. The room fell silent. Even Tom had stopped recording. Sarah's mind raced, trying to find logical explanations. Maybe Marcus had overheard something. Maybe he'd seen a news report. Maybe this was all coincidence and confirmation bias, and, "Mommy," Marcus said quietly, "I know you don't understand. I don't understand either, but Storm needs us to listen. Mr. Chen needs us to listen. Sometimes the important things don't make sense until after you do them." Detective Maria Santos arrived in 8 minutes, not 10. She was a compact woman with sharp eyes and an economy of movement that suggested she didn't waste time on nonsense. She took one look at the scene, the injured dog, the crying child, the bewildered adults, and made a decision. "Tell me everything," she said simply. So they did. Sarah explained finding Storm, Marcus's inexplicable knowledge, the connection that seemed to exist between boy and dog. Tom showed her the video he'd taken. Dr. Rivera provided the medical information and the microchip details. Through it all, Detective Santos took notes, her expression giving nothing away. When they finished, she looked directly at Marcus. "Hello, Marcus. I'm Detective Santos. Can you tell me about Mr. Chen?" Marcus, who had been intimidated by her arrival, seemed to relax at her direct approach. "He's stuck somewhere. He's been there a long time. Storm tried to find him, but she got confused because everything smells different now." "What smells different?" "The paint smell. Someone painted over the old smell. And there's new carpet. And the door isn't where it used to be." Detective Santos's pen stopped moving. "Marcus, are you saying someone renovated wherever Mr. Chen is?" The boy nodded. "They didn't know he was there. They covered him up by accident." "That's impossible," Tom said. "Someone would have heard him." 3 months? "The walls are really thick," Marcus interrupted. "And there's foam. The kind that makes it quiet. Mr. Chen put it there himself because he liked to play music late at night and didn't want to bother anyone." Detective Santos pulled out her phone, dialing quickly. "This is Santos. I need you to pull up any renovation permits filed for properties connected to Robert Chen in the last 3 months. Yes, all of them. Home, work, anywhere he had access." She paused, listening. "What do you mean there was one at the school? When?" Another pause. "And no one thought to check if he was there when it happened?" She hung up, her face grim. Robert Chen's music room at Riverside Elementary was renovated over summer break. They sealed off an old practice room to expand the main classroom. The work was completed 2 weeks after he disappeared. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. "You're not saying—" "I'm saying we're going to that school right now." Detective Santos looked at Marcus. "Can Storm show us where?" Marcus looked at the German Shepherd, who was struggling to stay upright, her injuries and exhaustion clearly overwhelming her. "She wants to, but she's too tired and hurt." "Then you'll have to help her remember," the detective said. "Can you do that?" Marcus nodded solemnly. "But we have to hurry. He's getting weaker. Sometimes he stops trying to make noise because it hurts too much." Dr. Rivera stepped forward. Storm needs medical attention. I can stabilize her, give her fluids and antibiotics, but she shouldn't be walking around. Can you come with us? Detective Santos asked. Bring what you need to treat her on site. The veterinarian hesitated, then nodded. Let me grab my emergency kit. Within minutes, they were in a convoy heading toward Riverside Elementary. Detective Santos led in her unmarked car with Marcus and Sarah. Tom followed in his truck, still recording everything with his phone. Dr. Rivera brought up the rear with Storm in his van, an IV line attached to her leg, the dog refusing to let Marcus out of her sight until the last possible moment. The school was dark, it being past 7 in the evening now. The rain had stopped, but the air was heavy with moisture, making everything feel closer, more oppressive. Detective Santos had called for backup and a fire department rescue unit, but she wasn't waiting. The renovation was in the East Wing, she said, pulling up building plans on her tablet. The old music room was here, and they expanded it by... Oh my God. What? Sarah asked. There was a practice room here, see? Just 4 by 6 feet, barely a closet. They walled it off to square up the classroom, if he was in there when it happened. Marcus was already out of the car, standing at the school's side entrance, his small hand pressed against the glass. This way? Storm says this way. The janitor who arrived to unlock the door looked confused and concerned, but Detective Santos's badge and urgent explanation got them inside quickly. They moved through dark hallways, their footsteps echoing off linoleum floors, past bulletin boards covered in children's artwork and motivational posters that seemed grotesque in the context of what they might find. The renovated music room was beautiful. New paint, new carpet, expanded space with acoustic panels on the walls, instruments lined up neatly on shelves. Everything perfect and pristine. Marcus walked slowly around the room, his hand trailing along the wall. Storm, who Dr. Rivera had carried in despite protocol, whined from her position on a blanket in the corner, her eyes tracking the boy's movement. Here, Marcus said suddenly, stopping at what looked like a completely normal wall. He's behind here, but it's not just wall, there's space. Detective Santos knocked on the wall. It sounded solid. She knocked a foot to the left, still solid. Then she knocked where Marcus was pointing. The sound was different, hollow. Get the fire department here now, she barked into her radio. We need tools to break through a wall, possible survivor inside. But Marcus was shaking his head. No, wait. Storm says there's another way, the old way from before. He moved along the wall to where a heavy shelf unit stood, loaded with boxes of sheet music. Behind here. There's a door behind here. Tom and Dr. Rivera helped move the shelf, and sure enough, there was an outline in the wall. Not obvious, but there, a door that had been painted over, sealed shut. Mr. Chen! Detective Santos shouted. Robert Chen, can you hear me? This is the police. Nothing. Marcus pressed his ear against the sealed door. He's there. He's there, but he can't answer. He's too weak. Stand back, Detective Santos ordered. She pulled out her service weapon. I'm going to shoot the lock. Wait, Tom said. I have a crowbar in my truck. Less dangerous. He ran out and returned in less than a minute. Working together, he and Detective Santos pried at the painted-over door. The paint cracked. The wood groaned. Then, with a sound like breaking bones, the door burst open. The smell hit them first. Stale air, human waste, desperation. Detective Santos shone her flashlight into the darkness, revealing a tiny room with soundproofing foam on every surface. And there, curled in the corner, on a makeshift bed of old choir robes, was what remained of Robert Chen. He was unconscious, skeletal, but his chest rose and fell with shallow breaths. Alive. Impossibly, miraculously alive. Get the paramedics in here now, Detective Santos shouted. But Marcus had already pushed past the adults, dropping to his knees beside the man. Mr. Chen, Storm is here. Storm found you. She never stopped looking. The man's eyes fluttered open, unfocused, uncomprehending. Then Storm dragged herself into the room, despite her injuries, despite Dr. Rivera's attempts to stop her. She crawled to her owner and collapsed beside him, her tail wagging weakly, soft whines escaping her throat. Robert Chen's hand moved just slightly, finding Storm's fur. His cracked lips formed a single word, Luna. That was his daughter's name, Detective Santos said quietly. The dog was named after the song, after the daughter. The paramedics arrived, Tom's colleagues who knew him and trusted his judgment enough not to ask too many questions about how a 5-year-old boy had led them to a man who'd been trapped for 3 months. They worked quickly, efficiently, starting IVs, checking vitals, preparing for transport. "How is he alive?" one of them asked. 3 months without food or water. "There's water," Marcus said, pointing to the corner where a small leak in the ceiling had created a puddle on the floor. "And he had these?" The boy indicated a box in the corner, mostly empty now, but with a few energy bars remaining. "He was locked in by accident when they came to renovate. His phone was in the main room. He tried to break out, but the soundproofing—" "He must have rationed everything," the paramedic said, amazed. "Survived on rainwater leaking in and whatever food he had. But still, the psychological toll alone." "He had Storm," Marcus said simply. "Not with him, but he knew she was out there. He knew she'd try to find help, so he kept hoping." As they loaded Robert onto a stretcher, Storm tried to follow, but her legs gave out. Dr. Rivera scooped her up, carrying her behind the stretcher. Marcus walked between them, one hand on Robert's stretcher, one hand touching Storm. "They're going to be okay," he said with that strange certainty. Both of them. They found each other again. Sarah watched her son, this small boy who had somehow known the impossible, who had felt the unfindable, who had heard the unhearable. The logical part of her mind was screaming that none of this made sense. But the mother part, the part that had always known Marcus was different, special, was beginning to accept that some gifts couldn't be explained. Outside, more police cars had arrived. News vans too, somehow alerted to the story. Tom's video had already been shared hundreds of times, and now the dramatic rescue would make it explode across social media. But in that moment, in the flashing lights and chaos, there was a bubble of quiet around Marcus, Storm, and Robert. The boy leaned close to the man's ear. "She never gave up. Every day she tried to find you. She got lost and hurt and scared, but she never stopped loving you. She says to tell you she's sorry she couldn't find you sooner." Robert's eyes filled with tears, spilling down his sunken cheeks. His hand found Marcus's small one and squeezed with what little strength he had. "Thank you," he whispered, the words barely audible. As the ambulance doors closed, taking Robert to the hospital, with Storm in the veterinary van right behind him, Sarah knelt beside Marcus. "How did you really know?" she asked. "I need to understand." Marcus looked up at her with those innocent eyes that had seen something beyond innocence. "Remember when I told you about my invisible friend? The one you said wasn't real?" Sarah nodded, remembering how Marcus had insisted for months that someone named Luna visited him in his dreams. "She wasn't invisible," Marcus said. "She was just not here anymore. Mr. Chen's daughter. She wanted someone to help her daddy and Storm. She knew I could hear things other people couldn't. So she asked me to listen." Sarah's rational mind wanted to reject this, to find a logical explanation. But looking at her son, at the certainty in his eyes, at everything that had just happened, she found herself believing. Is Luna still here?" Marcus shook his head. "She's quiet now. She's happy. Her daddy is safe." Detective Santos approached them, her professional composure clearly shaken. "Mrs. Thompson, I need to take a full statement from you and Marcus. But I want you to know, in 20 years on the force, I've never seen anything like this. Your son saved a man's life tonight." "It wasn't just me," Marcus said. "It was Storm. She never gave up. Love doesn't give up, even when it doesn't make sense." The detective nodded slowly. "No, I suppose it doesn't." As they walked back to their car, Sarah noticed Marcus was limping slightly. "Are you hurt, baby?" "My feet hurt," he admitted, "like I walked a really long way." Sarah stopped, kneeling to look at her son's feet. Through his rain-soaked sneakers, she could see his socks were stained with blood. When she carefully removed his shoes, she gasped. The soles of his feet were raw, blistered, as if he had indeed walked for miles. "Marcus, how?" "I walked with Storm," he said simply. "In the feeling place, where she was looking for Mr. Chen. It was really far and really hard, but I had to help her remember the way." Sarah carried her son to the car, her mind reeling. The physical evidence of something that shouldn't be physical. The impossible made manifest in blistered feet and saved lives. As she drove home, Marcus fell asleep in his booster seat, exhausted by whatever he had experienced. Sarah called David, trying to explain what had happened, but the words felt inadequate. How did you tell someone that your 5-year-old son had somehow spiritually walked with a dog to find a man who'd been accidentally buried alive? Just come home, David said, after she'd stumbled through the basics. We'll figure it out together. But there was nothing to figure out, Sarah realized. There was only something to accept, that Marcus had a gift, or a curse, or something in between. He could feel what others couldn't, know what shouldn't be knowable, find what was lost beyond finding. The next morning, the story was everywhere. Miracle Boy saves missing teacher. 5-year-old's impossible rescue. The boy who talks to dogs. Tom's video had millions of views. News crews were camped outside their house. But Marcus wasn't interested in any of it. He only wanted to know about Storm and Mr. Chen. Dr. Rivera called with updates. Storm was responding well to treatment, though she refused to eat unless someone told her that Robert was okay. Robert himself was in critical but stable condition, suffering from severe malnutrition and dehydration, but expected to make a full recovery. He's asking for Marcus, Doctor, Rivera said. Both of them are, actually. Robert keeps saying the boy saved his life, and Storm won't settle unless she can smell something that smells like Marcus. So, that afternoon, despite the media circus, despite the strangeness of it all, Sarah took Marcus to the hospital. They went in through a back entrance, escorted by Detective Santos, who had become something of an ally in navigating the insanity. Robert Chen looked like a skeleton with skin stretched over it, but his eyes were alert, alive in a way that spoke of a man who had touched death and chosen life. When he saw Marcus, those eyes filled with tears. "You heard her?" he whispered, his voice still raw. "You heard my Luna." Marcus approached the bed slowly, no longer the confident child who had known exactly what to do. Now he was just a 5-year-old boy meeting a stranger who wasn't quite a stranger. "She loved you very much," Marcus said. "She wanted you to be okay." Robert's sob was silent, his body too weak for noise. She was 7, leukemia, 2 years ago. Storm was her dog, her best friend. When she died, Storm was all I had left of her. "That's why you went to the practice room," Marcus said, not a question but a statement. "You went there to play her song where no one would hear you cry." Robert nodded. "I had just finished playing when I heard the construction crew. I went to tell them I was there, but the door jammed. The soundproofing I'd installed, they couldn't hear me screaming. By the time I realized they were sealing me in, it was too late." "Storm knew something was wrong," Marcus continued. "She felt it. But when she went to find you, everything had changed. The renovation, the new paint, it all smelled wrong. She got confused, lost, hurt." "How do you know this?" Robert asked. "How can you possibly know?" Marcus looked at his mother, then back at Robert. "I don't know how. I just do. Like how I knew Storm's name before anyone told me. Like how I knew you were running out of time. Sometimes I just know things." Robert reached out with a trembling hand, and Marcus took it. "Thank you. Thank you for listening when no one else could hear." They went to see Storm next. The German Shepherd was in a veterinary recovery room, looking much better than she had the day before. Her tail started wagging the moment she smelled Marcus, and when she saw Robert on the video call, Doctor. Rivera had arranged, she tried to stand despite the IV lines. "Easy, girl," Robert said through the phone screen, his voice stronger just from seeing her. "Easy, I'm okay, we're both okay." Storm settled, but kept her eyes fixed on the screen, occasional whines escaping as if she was trying to tell him everything that had happened. "She says she's sorry," Marcus translated, though no one had asked him to. "She tried so hard to find you, but she couldn't do it alone." "She found you," Robert said, looking at Marcus through the camera. "Somehow, she found the one person who could understand." As the days passed, the story evolved from a simple rescue to something more complex. Investigators discovered that the renovation had been rushed, proper permits hadn't been filed, and safety protocols hadn't been followed. The construction company faced serious legal consequences. But more than that, the story became about connection, about the bonds that transcend logic and explanation. Scientists wanted to study Marcus, to understand his abilities, Psychologists wanted to examine his brain to find the mechanism behind his knowing, but Sarah and David protected him fiercely, allowing only Dr. Rivera and Detective Santos regular access, the two adults who had believed when believing seemed impossible. "He's not a lab rat," Sarah told one persistent researcher. "He's a 5-year-old boy who happens to feel things deeply. That's all." But it wasn't all, and everyone knew it. Marcus's kindergarten teacher reported that he had started helping other children in unexpected ways. He knew when someone was being bullied, even when it happened out of sight. He could tell when a classmate was sick before symptoms showed. He found lost items by holding the owner's hand and walking until he felt warm. "It's getting stronger," Marcus told his mother one evening as she tucked him into bed. "The feeling thing. Since Storm, it's like a door opened and now I can't close it." "Is that scary?" Sarah asked, smoothing his hair. Marcus thought about it. "Sometimes. But Storm needed me to have it. Mr. Chen needed me to have it. So maybe it's not scary. Maybe it's just what I'm supposed to do." "Help people? Help people find what's lost," Marcus corrected. "Or help lost things find their people." A week later, Robert was released from the hospital. He was 20 pounds underweight and would need months of physical therapy, but he was alive. Storm had already been released to his care, and the reunion video went viral worldwide. The German Shepherd's joy was explosive, her whole body wiggling as she tried to be gentle with her fragile owner, while also expressing 3 months of separation and fear and relief. But it was Marcus they called first, when Storm wouldn't eat again 2 days later. "She's scared he'll disappear again if she's not watching," Marcus explained after spending a few minutes with the dog. "She needs to know it's safe to look away." It took patience, with Marcus visiting daily, for Storm to begin to trust that Robert was truly back, truly safe. And in those visits, a friendship developed between the man and the boy, connected by a dog and a daughter, and something beyond understanding. "Luna would have loved you," Robert told Marcus one afternoon as they sat in his backyard. Storm. In between them. She had the same gift. She always knew when people were hurting. "Is that why she came to me?" Marcus asked. "Because I'm like her?" Robert smiled, the expression transforming his gaunt face. "Maybe. Or maybe she knew Storm, and I needed someone exactly like you." The media attention eventually died down, as media attention does, moving on to the next sensation. But the impact of what had happened rippled outward in ways both seen and unseen. Dr. Rivera started a program pairing traumatized animals with empathetic children, inspired by Marcus and Storm's connection. Detective Santos began consulting Marcus on missing person cases, though always unofficially and always with his parents' permission. Tom the paramedic became an advocate for taking impossible reports seriously, teaching other first responders that sometimes the unbelievable was the truth. And Marcus? He grew up knowing things he shouldn't know, feeling things others couldn't feel, finding what was lost in ways that defied explanation. Some called him gifted, some called him strange. But those who had witnessed that rainy afternoon on Highway 47, who had seen a boy save a man through a dog's love, they called him exactly what he was, a miracle wrapped in a 5-year-old's body, proof that love speaks in languages we're only beginning to understand. The night before Marcus started first grade, he had a dream. Luna was there, Robert's daughter, clear as day for the first time. She didn't speak, but she smiled and pointed to a map that appeared in the dream, a red dot blinking in a place Marcus didn't recognize. When he woke, he drew the map as best he could with his crayons. 3 days later, Detective Santos called. A child had gone missing in the next county. Did Marcus have any feelings about it? Marcus looked at his crayon map, then at Storm, who had come for a visit while Robert was at a doctor's appointment. The German Shepherd was looking at him with those knowing eyes, that same expression she'd had on the highway. "Yes," Marcus said, "I have a feeling. But that's a story for another time, another rescue, another moment when the impossible became possible through the pure connection between a child and the lost souls who needed finding." The crayon map sat on Detective Santos's desk like evidence of something that shouldn't exist. She'd been a cop for 20 years, had seen everything from the mundane to the horrific, but a child's drawing that might lead to a missing 6-year-old girl challenged everything she thought she knew about police work. "Her name is Emma," Santos said, showing Marcus and Sarah the missing person flyer. Emma Rodriguez. She wandered away from a camping site 3 days ago. We've had search teams, dogs, helicopters, nothing. Marcus studied the photo of the smiling girl with pigtails and missing front teeth. His hand moved unconsciously to pet Storm, who sat pressed against his leg. The German Shepherd had become his constant companion. Whenever Robert needed to be away, their bond strengthened by what they'd shared. "She's not lost," Marcus said suddenly, his voice taking on that distant quality Sarah had learned to recognize. "She's hiding." "Hiding?" Detective Santos leaned forward. "From what?" Marcus's eyes unfocused, as if seeing something beyond the room. "From the loud man, the one who smells like smoke and yells. She saw him hurt her mom, so she ran into the trees and found a place where he couldn't find her." Santos's expression sharpened. "Marcus, are you saying this isn't a missing child case? That this is about domestic violence?" The boy nodded, his small hand tightening in Storm's fur. "Emma's smart. She made herself small and quiet like her mom taught her, but now she's too scared to come out, even though the bad man is gone." "Gone where?" Santos asked, already reaching for her phone. "Jail," Marcus said simply. "You already caught him for something else. You just didn't know about Emma yet." Within an hour, Santos had confirmed something that sent chills through the department. Emma's father, Miguel Rodriguez, had been arrested 2 days ago for drunk and disorderly conduct at a bar 50 miles from the campsite. He'd been ranting about his wife leaving him, about teaching her a lesson. Officers had dismissed it as drunk talk. "The mother," Santos said, reading from a hospital report that had just come through. Maria Rodriguez was admitted to a hospital the night Emma disappeared. Severe bruising, broken ribs. She said she fell while hiking, but the injuries are consistent with assault. She's been sedated since admission. No one knew there was a child with them. Sarah watched her son, who is now drawing another picture, this one showing trees in a small cave-like space. "Marcus, how do you know Emma is hiding and not lost?" Marcus looked up, his brown eyes too old for his face. "Because Storm knows what hiding feels like. When she was trying to find Mr. Chen, sometimes she had to hide from people who wanted to catch her. She shows me the feeling, and I can feel Emma feeling the same thing." It didn't make sense. It would never make sense by conventional logic. But Sarah had learned that Marcus's gift didn't operate by conventional logic. "Can you find her?" Santos asked directly. Marcus nodded, then looked at Storm. "But we need to go now. She's getting weaker. She found water but no food, and she's cold at night. She won't last much longer." The drive to the campsite took 2 hours. Santos had assembled a small team, keeping it limited to avoid overwhelming the frightened child, if Marcus was right. Sarah insisted on coming, and Robert Chen, still thin but growing stronger, had volunteered to help with Storm. "She knows things," Robert had said simply when asked why he believed in Marcus's abilities. "Storm understands suffering in ways that go beyond instinct, and Marcus can hear what she knows." The campsite was in a heavily wooded area, the kind of place where a child could disappear in minutes and never be found. Search teams had covered every inch within a 5-mile radius, but they'd been looking for a lost child, not a hiding one. Marcus stood at the edge of the woods, Storm beside him, both absolutely still. The search team waited, skeptical but willing to follow Santos's lead. "She went this way," Marcus said, pointing not toward the obvious trails, but into thick underbrush. "She was running and crying, and her daddy was yelling behind her. She knew these woods because her mom brought her here before, when things were good." They followed Marcus and Storm through brambles and over fallen logs. The German Shepherd moved with purpose, occasionally stopping to sniff the air, then looking back at Marcus as if confirming something only they understood. After 30 minutes of hiking, Marcus stopped. "She's close, but she won't come out. She's too scared. She thinks anyone calling for her might be trying to trick her, to take her back to her daddy." "What do we do?" Santos asked. Marcus knelt down, placing both hands on the ground. Storm lay beside him, her body pressed against his. For long minutes they stayed like that, the search team growing restless but staying quiet at Santos's sharp gesture. "Emma," Marcus called out suddenly, his voice different, lighter somehow. "Emma, my name is Marcus. I'm 5 years old, almost 6. I have a dog named Storm. Your mommy is safe. She's in the hospital, but she's okay. Your daddy can't hurt her anymore. Nothing." Forest sounds and wind, but nothing human. Marcus tried again. Emma, I know you're scared. I get scared too. When I'm scared, Storm helps me feel better. She's really nice. She was lost once too, and scared, but now she's safe. You can be safe too. A rustling, so faint it might have been an animal. But Storm's ears perked up, her tail giving a single wag. I brought you something, Marcus continued, pulling his backpack around. He took out a juice box and a package of cookies, his own snacks that Sarah had packed. Are you hungry? I have apple juice and chocolate chip cookies. We could share. More rustling, closer now. Then from behind a massive fallen tree covered in moss and ferns, a small face appeared. Emma Rodriguez looked like a wild thing, her hair tangled with leaves, her face streaked with dirt and tears, her clothes torn from brambles. But her eyes were alert, wary, focused on Marcus. Is the dog nice? She whispered, the first words she'd spoken in 3 days. The nicest, Marcus promised. She helped save someone who was trapped. She's really good at keeping people safe. Emma emerged a little more, her body trembling from cold and fear and hunger. The search team started to move forward, but Marcus held up his hand without looking back, a gesture so adult that it stopped them cold. Would you like to pet her? Marcus asked. Storm really likes kids. She had a girl who loved her before, named Luna. That did it. Something about the way Marcus said it, the pure innocence in his voice, the patient way Storm was lying there, tail wagging gently. Emma crawled out from her hiding spot, a small cave formed by the fallen tree and some rocks, exactly the kind of place searchers had checked, but a scared child could make herself invisible in. She approached slowly, each step of victory over terror. When she reached them, she didn't go for the cookies or juice. She went straight to Storm, falling to her knees and burying her face in the dog's fur, her tiny body shaking with sobs that had been held in for 3 days. Storm, that traumatized dog who had suffered her own abandonment, wrapped her body around the child, becoming a living shield against the world. And Marcus sat beside them, his hand on Emma's back, not saying anything, just being present in the way children can be present for each other. It's okay now, he whispered finally. The scary part is over. Santos radioed for medical support, her voice thick with emotion. The other searchers stood back, recognizing something sacred was happening, something that didn't belong to the adult world of procedure and protocol. When the paramedics arrived, Emma wouldn't let go of Storm. She'd transferred her grip from the dog's fur to Marcus's hand, but she needed that connection, that bridge between terror and safety. Can Storm come with me? She asked, the question directed at Marcus as if he was the authority on all things Storm. Marcus looked at Robert, who had been standing quietly at the edge of the scene. Robert nodded immediately. Of course she can come. She's very good at helping scared people feel better. The ride to the hospital was quiet except for Emma's occasional whispered conversations with Storm. She told the dog about the scary night, about hearing her daddy hurt her mommy, about running and running until she found the special hiding place her mommy had shown her once when they were playing hide and seek. Mommy said if I was ever really scared, I should hide there and wait for her, Emma explained. But she didn't come. She couldn't, Marcus said gently. She was hurt, but she wanted to come. She's been so worried about you. At the hospital, the reunion between Emma and her mother was everything such reunions should be. Tears, relief, promises that things would be different now. Maria Rodriguez, despite her injuries, pulled her daughter close and didn't let go for a long time. How did you find her? She asked Santos through her tears. The search team said they looked everywhere. Santos nodded toward Marcus, who was sitting in the corner with Storm, both of them looking exhausted. He knew she was hiding, not lost. He understood what she was feeling. Maria looked at the small boy with the two wise eyes. Thank you, she said simply. Thank you for bringing my baby back. Marcus nodded, but his attention had shifted. He was looking at Storm, his face troubled. Something's wrong, he said suddenly. Storm was panting heavily, her body trembling. Dr. Rivera, who had been called to check on her after the long day, examined her quickly. Her heart rate is elevated, he said. Stress, probably. This was a lot for a dog still recovering from her own trauma. But Marcus shook his head. No, it's not that. She's feeling something. Someone else who needs help. Sarah knelt beside her son. Marcus, honey, you've done enough today. Storm needs rest. You both do. But Mom, she's trying to tell me something important. Marcus's face scrunched up in concentration. There's another child. No, not a child. Someone young, but not a child. They're in trouble. Really bad trouble. Santos, who had been preparing to leave, stopped. Marcus, are you sure? The boy nodded, his hand on Storm's head. Storm can feel them. They're hurt and scared and they can't call for help because... He paused, his expression confused. Because they can't speak? That doesn't make sense. Someone who can't speak, Santos repeated, her mind already working. A disability? Maybe, Marcus said uncertainly. Storm is showing me feelings, but they're all mixed up. Pain and fear and Anne being trapped, but not like Mister. Chen was trapped, different, worse somehow. Robert, who had been quiet throughout the exchange, spoke up. When Storm was on the streets, after I disappeared, she would have encountered all kinds of people. Maybe she met someone who needs help. Santos pulled out her phone, checking recent reports. There's nothing about a missing person with speech disabilities, but... She paused, reading something. Wait, there was a report yesterday about strange noises coming from an abandoned building on Riverside Drive. Neighbors thought it was cats or maybe addicts. Patrol did a cursory check but found nothing. Marcus stood up suddenly, his face pale. We need to go there. Now. Marcus, Sarah started, but her son cut her off. Mom, please. Storm is really upset. She keeps showing me the same thing over and over. Someone young who can't cry for help, who's been trying to make noise, but people think it's something else. Please. It was the desperation in his voice that decided it. That and the way Storm was now pacing, whining, clearly agitated about something beyond the day's exertion. I'll send a unit to check it out, Santos said. No! Marcus's shout surprised everyone. If you send strangers, they'll be too scared. It has to be us. Storm knows them. They'll trust Storm. Santos looked at Sarah, who looked at Robert, who looked at Storm. The German Shepherd had stopped pacing and was now standing at the door, every line of her body indicating urgency. 1 hour, Santos said finally. We check it out for 1 hour. If we don't find anything, we go home and rest. The abandoned building on Riverside Drive had been a textile factory decades ago, then a warehouse, then nothing. It squatted against the darkening sky like a broken tooth, windows boarded or broken, walls covered in graffiti, the kind of place people hurried past, not wanting to think about what might be inside. Storm began whining before they even got out of the car. Not her usual whine, but something deeper, more urgent. She pulled toward the building with a strength that surprised Robert, who was holding her leash. She definitely knows this place, he said. They entered through a gap in the chain-link fence, Santos leading with her flashlight and hand on her service weapon. The inside was a maze of debris, broken machinery, and shadows that seemed to move in the flashlight beams. Storm led them up a crumbling staircase to the second floor, then down a long hallway where the ceiling had partially collapsed. At the end of the hallway was a door, padlocked from the outside. That's new, Santos said, examining the lock. Everything else here is decades old, but this lock was put on recently. From behind the door came a sound, not quite human, not quite animal, a keening that raised the hair on everyone's necks. That's them, Marcus said with certainty. That's who Storm has been trying to tell us about. Santos called for backup and bolt cutters. While they waited, Marcus sat by the door, talking softly. Hey, it's okay. Storm is here. Remember Storm, the German Shepherd who shared her food with you? She's been looking for you. We're going to get you out. The keening stopped. Then, a scratching against the door, frantic and desperate. When the bolt cutters arrived and the lock was removed, what they found inside broke everyone's hearts. A teenager, maybe 15 or 16, huddled in the corner of what had once been an office. The boy was deaf and autistic. That much was immediately apparent from his behaviors, and the hearing aids scattered broken on the floor. He was malnourished, dehydrated, and had clearly been locked in for days. But when he saw Storm, his face transformed. He made a sound that wasn't quite speech, but was definitely recognition, reaching out with trembling hands. Storm went to him immediately, crawling into his lap despite her size, licking his face, her tail wagging so hard her whole body shook. "This is Ben," Marcus said suddenly. "His name is Ben. He ran away from a bad foster home and was living on the streets. Storm would share her food with him when she was lost. They took care of each other. Santos was already on her phone, calling for medical support and checking missing person reports. Benjamin Walsh," she confirmed, 16, deaf, autistic, reported missing from a foster home 2 weeks ago. The foster parents said he was violent and uncontrollable, but she read further, her expression darkening. "There have been multiple complaints about that foster home, suspected abuse but never proven." Ben was clinging to Storm, making sounds that weren't words but were clearly communication of some kind, and somehow Marcus seemed to understand. "He says the foster father locked him in here," Marcus translated, though no one questioned how he could possibly know that. "Told him he was going to teach him a lesson about running away. Said no one would miss a kid who couldn't even talk properly." The rage on Santos's face was controlled but visible. "We'll find him," she said quietly. "I promise you, Ben. We'll find him, and he'll never hurt another child again." But Ben wasn't listening to her. His attention was entirely on Storm and, by extension, Marcus. He made a series of gestures that weren't quite sign language but seemed to have meaning. "He wants to know if Storm is okay," Marcus said. He was worried about her when she stopped coming to share food. Robert knelt beside them, tears on his face. "She's okay now. She found her way home, and she found you." The paramedics who arrived were gentle, understanding that Ben's trauma went beyond the physical. But he wouldn't let go of Storm, and Storm wouldn't leave him. Finally, they had to transport them together, the dog riding in the ambulance with the boy, Marcus insisting on coming too. "He needs someone who understands," Marcus said with that eerie wisdom. "Someone who knows what it's like when words don't work right." At the hospital, the story began to unfold. Ben had been in the foster system since he was 10, moved from home to home, each placement failing because no one knew how to communicate with him properly. He'd learned to survive on the streets, finding safe places to sleep, begging for food with gestures and expressions. Storm was his only friend, Marcus explained to the social worker who had arrived. She didn't need words to understand him. When she disappeared, when she went looking for Mr. Chen, Ben thought she'd abandoned him like everyone else. The foster father was arrested that night, charged with false imprisonment, child abuse, and a host of other crimes that had finally come to light. Other children from the home were removed and interviewed. The House of Horrors had been operating for years, but Ben's case had broken it wide open. But the legal victories felt hollow compared to the human cost. Ben was traumatized beyond what any child should endure. He wouldn't let anyone except Marcus near him, and only then if Storm was present. "He needs a real home," Marcus told his parents that night. "Someone who understands different ways of talking." Sarah and David exchanged glances. They'd been discussing this since the hospital, knowing where their son's heart was leading. "Marcus," David said carefully, "we can't take in every person you and Storm help." "Not every person," Marcus agreed. "Just Ben." It was an impossible request. They weren't trained in sign language or autism care. They already had their hands full with Marcus's unusual abilities. Adding a traumatized teenager to their family seemed like too much. But then Storm made the decision for them. When it came time to leave the hospital, Storm refused to go. She planted herself beside Ben's bed and wouldn't budge, not for commands, not for treats, not even for Marcus. "She's choosing," Robert said quietly, "the same way she chose Marcus that day on the highway. She knows Ben needs her more right now." It was decided that Storm would stay with Ben at the temporary care facility where he was placed while the authorities figured out what to do with him. But she could only stay if someone took responsibility for her, and that someone ended up being the Thompson family, which meant daily visits, which meant Marcus learning sign language at a speed that amazed his teachers, which meant Sarah and David slowly falling in love with this silent boy who had survived so much. 3 months later, the adoption papers were signed. Ben Thompson officially joined the family, bringing with him Storm, who had become his service dog in all but official certification. "You knew, didn't you?" Sarah asked Marcus the night they brought Ben home. "From that first day, you knew he'd become our family." Marcus shrugged, a gesture he'd picked up from his new brother. "Storm knew? She just helped me understand. Ben's recovery wasn't instant or easy. There were nights when nightmares sent him into panic attacks that only Storm could calm. There were days when the world felt too loud, too bright, too much, and he would hide in his closet with the dog, Marcus sitting outside the door, telling stories that Ben couldn't hear but somehow felt. But there were also moments of pure joy. The first time Ben laughed, really laughed, at something Marcus did. The first time he signed "I love you" to Sarah and David. The first time he felt safe enough to sleep without Storm directly beside him, though she never went far. Dr. Rivera, who had become something of a family friend, studied the dynamics with professional interest. "Storm bridges the gap," he explained to a colleague who had come to observe. "She translates emotional states between the boys in a way that transcends normal communication." Indeed, Marcus and Ben developed their own language, part sign, part gesture, part something that existed only between them and Storm. They could have entire conversations without a single spoken word, Storm often serving as the conduit for emotions too complex for signs or speech. The media attention this time was different. It wasn't just about a miracle rescue, but about a family that had formed in the most unlikely way, about communication that didn't need words, about love that didn't require explanation. Schools invited them to speak, or rather, invited Marcus to speak, while Ben and Storm demonstrated the power of nonverbal communication. They showed how Storm could alert Ben to sounds he couldn't hear, how she could calm him when the world became overwhelming, how she helped Marcus understand what Ben was feeling when signs weren't enough. "Everyone talks about special needs," Marcus said at one presentation, wise beyond his 6 years. "But Ben doesn't have special needs. He has different needs, and Storm helps us understand the difference." 1 year after the highway rescue that started it all, they held a celebration. Robert Chen was there, fully recovered and teaching music again, though now he incorporated therapy elements for children who had experienced trauma. Detective Santos attended, having become an advocate for taking children's intuitions seriously in missing person cases. Dr. Rivera brought news that Storm had officially been certified as a therapy dog, able to work with both Ben and other children who needed her special kind of understanding. Even Emma Rodriguez came with her mother, both of them thriving in their new life, free from fear. Emma had started kindergarten and often drew pictures of Storm and the boy who had found her in the woods. "You saved us all," Maria Rodriguez told Marcus. "You and Storm. You heard us when we couldn't speak." But Marcus shook his head. "Storm saved us. She showed me how to listen with more than just ears, how to find what's lost with more than just eyes." As the party continued around them, Ben signed something to Marcus, who signed back, both of them grinning. Storm, lying between them, tail wagging, seemed to understand the joke. "What did he say?" Sarah asked. Marcus smiled. "He said Storm is planning another rescue. He can feel it." Sarah's heart skipped. "Another one?" "Don't worry," Marcus assured her. "Ben says this time it's not a person." 3 days later, Storm led them to a drainage pipe where a litter of abandoned puppies was slowly starving. The rescue made the news, but by then, no one was surprised. The boy who could feel what others couldn't, the teenager who spoke without words, and the German shepherd who bridged the gap between them. They had become legend in their small city. But they weren't thinking about legend that night as they bottle-fed 7 tiny puppies, Storm supervising with maternal intensity. They were just a family, unusual perhaps, brought together by trauma and held together by love, speaking in languages most people didn't know existed. Ben signed something to Marcus, who laughed and translated for his parents. He says Storm wants to keep all the puppies. "Absolutely not," David said firmly. Storm looked at him and tilted her head in that way that had convinced them to stop on a highway, to search an abandoned building, to adopt a boy who couldn't speak. "Well," David amended, "maybe one." In the end, they kept 2, because Storm, as they had all learned, usually knew what they needed before they knew it themselves. The puppies grew, and with them grew the family's reputation. People started bringing them cases, not officially, but quietly. A grandmother whose granddaughter had vanished. A mother whose son with Down syndrome had wandered off. A father whose daughter had run away but left her beloved cat behind. Marcus and Ben worked together on these cases, Storm always between them, translating feelings and instincts into action. They didn't find everyone. Some people didn't want to be found, and both boys could sense that, respecting the difference between lost and choosing to be gone. But when someone was truly lost, truly in danger, truly needed finding, that's when the magic happened. That's when Marcus's gift and Ben's unique perception and Storm's bridging presence combined into something greater than the sum of its parts. Detective Santos started an informal task force, consulting with the family on cases that had gone cold. The success rate was remarkable enough that other departments started calling, asking for help with their own impossible cases. "We're not psychics," Marcus would insist to anyone who asked. "We just pay attention to different things than most people." Ben would sign his own explanation, which Marcus would translate. "People think communication is about words. But most communication happens in the spaces between words. Storm lives in those spaces. She helps us see them." Dr. Rivera published a paper on their unusual family dynamic, careful to protect their privacy while exploring the implications for understanding nonverbal communication and empathy. It won awards and started conversations about different ways of knowing and understanding, but the accolades meant less to them than the quiet moments. Ben teaching Marcus to sign stories, Marcus helping Ben understand spoken conversations through Storm's reactions. Sarah and David learning that parenting meant adapting to each child's unique language. Storm, always Storm, weaving between them all, the thread that held their patchwork family together. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Ben signed something that made Marcus go very still. "What did he say?" Sarah asked, recognizing the look on her younger son's face. "He says Luna is here," Marcus whispered, "Robert's daughter. She says thank you." They all turned to look at Ben, who was smiling peacefully, his hand on Storm's head. "You can feel her too?" Marcus asked in sign. Ben nodded and signed back, "Not feel." "No, different kind of knowing. Storm shows me." It was then they understood that Marcus's gift hadn't appeared randomly. It had been called forth by need, by Storm's desperate attempt to save Robert, by Luna's love reaching across the veil. And now Ben had his own version of it, shaped by his own experiences and needs. "We're going to help a lot of people, aren't we?" Marcus asked, looking at his brother. Ben's signs were simple, but profound. "Already started." As night fell and they headed inside, Storm paused at the doorway, looking back at the road where it all began. Her tail wagged once, acknowledging something only she could see. Then she followed her boys inside. The next morning brought a call from Detective Santos. A child with severe autism had wandered from his home in the night. The parents were devastated, search teams were out, but the boy was nonverbal and wouldn't respond to calls. Marcus looked at Ben, who was already getting Storm's leash. "We'll be right there," Marcus told Santos. As they drove to the search site, Sarah watched her boys in the rearview mirror. Marcus was explaining to Ben what he felt about the missing child: confusion, fascination with water, the need to find somewhere quiet. Ben was signing back his own insights, drawn from his experiences on the streets. Storm sat between them, her head moving back and forth, as if following a conversation only partially visible to the human world. They found the boy within an hour, sitting by a creek 2 miles from his home, arranging rocks in careful patterns. He didn't respond to the search team, but when Ben approached, moving slowly, not making eye contact, humming in a way that wasn't quite music but wasn't quite not music, the boy looked up. Ben sat down beside him and began arranging his own rocks. Marcus translated the silence for the anxious parents. Ben's showing him it's safe, that he understands, that the patterns make sense even if others don't see it. Storm lay down between them, and the boy, who hadn't let anyone touch him in years, reached out and buried his fingers in her fur. "How?" the mother asked through tears. "How did they know?" Marcus smiled, the expression both childlike and ancient. "Because they've been where he is, lost in a world that doesn't speak your language. Storm helped them find their way out. Now they're helping others do the same." The story made national news. The silent heroes, a deaf teen, an empathic child, and a German shepherd save lives. But the attention felt hollow compared to the look on the autistic boy's face when he finally let his parents hold him. Storm's presence making the contact bearable. That night, Ben signed something to Marcus that would become their motto, their mission statement, their truth. Not broken, different. Storm knows different is not broken. The calls kept coming. The rescues continued, not all successful, but all attempted with the full force of their unusual gifts. And through it all, Storm was the constant, the bridge, the translator, the heart of their strange and wonderful family. 5 years passed. Marcus, now 11, had helped find 43 missing people. Ben, 21, had become an advocate for nonverbal individuals, teaching classes with Storm on alternative communication. Their methods were studied, sometimes doubted, but never fully explained. "Do you ever wonder," Sarah asked David one night, "what would have happened if we hadn't stopped that day?" David pulled her close. "I don't wonder. I know. We would have missed the entire point of our lives." In Ben's room, the walls were covered with pictures. Every person they'd found, every family reunited, every life saved. In the center was the first photo, Marcus and Storm on that rainy highway, the beginning of everything. Ben touched the photo, then signed to Storm, who was curled on his bed. "Thank you for choosing us." Storm's tail thumped against the mattress, and in that sound was all the answer anyone needed. But the story wasn't over. Would never really be over, as long as there were lost souls needing to be found. That very night, as the family slept, Storm raised her head, ears perked, sensing something the others couldn't yet feel. Somewhere, someone was lost. Somewhere, someone needed finding. She padded to Marcus's room first, then Ben's, waking them with the gentle insistence that had started it all. The boys met in the hallway, reading Storm's body language with practiced ease. "Tomorrow?" Marcus asked. Ben signed. "Tonight. Urgent." They woke their parents, who had learned to trust these midnight intuitions. Detective Santos answered on the first ring, as if she'd been expecting the call. "There's been a bus accident," she said. "A child is missing from the scene. We think she was ejected and wandered off in shock. The area is heavily wooded, and it's starting to snow. Marcus was already getting dressed. She's hurt, but not badly. Confused. Looking for her mother. She can't understand why her mother won't answer her." "The mother is in critical condition," Santos said quietly. "Unconscious." Ben signed something that Marcus translated. "The girl is walking toward lights. She thinks the lights are the hospital where her mother must be, but the lights are from the highway. She's walking toward traffic." "How could you possibly—" Santos started, then stopped. She'd learned not to question, just to act. "We're mobilizing now. Meet us at mile marker 47, where it all began." The circle was complete, but not closed, never closed. Because Storm had taught them that some connections transcend explanation, that love speaks in frequencies humans are only beginning to hear, and that sometimes the most profound truths come through the simple act of listening with more than just your ears. As they drove through the snowy night toward another rescue, another chance to find the lost, Marcus reached over and took Ben's hand. Ben squeezed back. Storm, sitting between them, placed a paw on each of their legs. No words were needed. They never really had been. The snow was falling harder by the time they reached mile marker 47, the same stretch of highway where Storm had been found shaking in the rain 5 years earlier. The coincidence wasn't lost on anyone, least of all Marcus, who felt the weight of coming full circle. "Her name is Lily," Santos said, showing them a school photo of a 7-year-old with bright eyes and missing front teeth. "She was sitting next to her mother when the bus rolled. We found everyone else, but Lily." Ben was already kneeling in the snow, his hands flat on the ground, Storm beside him mirroring his posture. They stayed like that for long moments while the search team waited, having learned to trust this strange ritual. Suddenly Ben stood, signing rapidly. Marcus translated, "She's moving away from us, but slowly. She's hurt her ankle. She's following something. A light, or maybe... No, it's a sound. She hears something we don't." "The highway," one of the search team members said. "Traffic sounds could be echoing strangely through the valley." But Marcus shook his head. "No, it's not that. Storm knows this sound. It's singing. Someone is singing." They spread out, following Storm's lead as she moved with purpose through the snow-covered trees. The German Shepherd's age was showing now. She was getting gray around her muzzle, moving a bit slower than in her youth. But her determination was undiminished. 20 minutes into the search, they heard it. Faint, carried on the wind, a child's voice singing a lullaby, high and sweet and wrong somehow. "That's her," Marcus said, but his face was troubled. "But something's not right. She's not singing to herself. She's singing to someone else. They found Lily in a small clearing, and the sight stopped them all cold. The 7-year-old was sitting in the snow, her ankle clearly swollen, cradling something in her arms and singing softly. As they got closer, they could see what she held, a small fox kit, barely alive, shivering violently. "My mommy needs help," Lily said when she saw them, her voice calm despite her tears. "But this baby needs help too. I couldn't leave it. Mommy wouldn't want me to leave it." Ben moved forward slowly, his movements careful and non-threatening. He signed something to Marcus, who relayed, "Ben says the kit's mother was hit by a car. Lily found it trying to wake her up." Storm approached the child and the fox kit, her maternal instincts overriding any predator-prey dynamics. She sniffed the kit gently, then looked at Ben and Marcus with those expressive eyes that had started everything. "We'll help both," Marcus told Lily. "Your mommy and the fox baby. That's what we do. We help whoever needs it." As the paramedics treated Lily's ankle and prepared to transport her, she refused to let go of the fox kit. "Promise," she said, looking directly at Marcus. "Promise you'll save it." Marcus looked at the barely breathing kit, then at Storm, who was watching with intense focus. "We promise." Dr. Rivera met them at his clinic, having been called ahead. "A fox kit? That's a first," he said, but he was already preparing treatment. "Severe hypothermia, dehydration, probably hasn't eaten since its mother died." "Will it survive?" Marcus asked. "Honestly? Probably not. Wild animals this young, without their mothers." Rivera trailed off, seeing the determination in both boys' eyes. "But then again, I said the same thing about Storm once." They worked through the night. Ben held the kit while Rivera administered fluids. Marcus sat with Storm, who hadn't taken her eyes off the tiny creature. And something extraordinary happened. Storm began to whine, a specific pattern of sounds that Ben recognized. "She's calling it," Ben signed, "like a mother calling a puppy." The kit's ear twitched. Its breathing, which had been barely perceptible, strengthened slightly. "Keep going, Storm," Marcus encouraged. For hours, Storm continued her strange song, a mixture of whines and soft barks that seemed to reach something primal in the dying kit. And slowly, impossibly, it began to respond. By morning, the kit was stable, weak but stable, and curled against Storm's belly, nursing from a bottle that Ben held while Storm licked its head. "This is medically impossible," Rivera said, exhausted but amazed. "That kit should be dead. Storm isn't even producing milk, but she's somehow convinced it to fight, to eat, to live." The news of Lily's rescue made headlines, but it was the story of the fox kit that captured the public's imagination. Photos of Storm mothering the tiny creature, of Ben teaching it to eat, of Marcus somehow knowing exactly when it was in distress, went viral worldwide. But there was a problem. Wildlife law prohibited keeping a fox as a pet. The kit would have to be turned over to a wildlife rehabilitation center as soon as it was stable. "That's not right," Marcus said firmly. "Storm saved it. They bonded. You can't separate them now." Santos, who had become an unofficial advocate for the family, made some calls. There were exceptions to wildlife laws for educational purposes. If the family was willing to get licensed, to work with schools and conservation groups. "We'll do whatever it takes," Sarah said, watching Storm groom the kit with infinite gentleness. The licensing process was complex, but they had help from unexpected quarters. The Wildlife Rehabilitation Center, having heard of Storm's miraculous effect on the kit, proposed a partnership. The fox could stay with the family, but would be part of educational programs about wildlife conservation and the human-animal bond. They named the fox Luna, after Robert Chen's daughter, who Marcus insisted had guided them to find both the child and the kit that night. Luna the fox became part of their unusual family, though she was never quite tame. She lived between worlds, wild enough to maintain her fox nature, but tame enough to trust Storm and, by extension, the boys. She became part of their rescue work in unexpected ways, her acute senses often alerting them to things even Storm missed. 1 year later, they were called to find an elderly man with dementia who had wandered from his care facility. The search had been going on for 2 days in dense woodland. The man, a war veteran named Arthur, had been a tracker in his youth, and his confused mind had reverted to those skills, making him nearly impossible to find. Luna was the one who found him, her wild instincts understanding patterns of movement that domesticated animals might miss. She led them to a cleverly concealed shelter Arthur had built, where he was convinced he was still on a mission from 1968. Ben, understanding what it was like to be trapped in a different reality, sat with Arthur for 3 hours, not trying to convince him of the truth, but entering his world, becoming part of his mission until Arthur trusted him enough to complete the objective and return to base, which happened to be the care facility. The rescue made news, but more importantly, it opened new doors. The Veterans Administration reached out, wondering if the family's unique approach might help with other veterans struggling with PTSD and dementia. "We're not therapists," David protested at a meeting with the VA officials. "No," the lead administrator agreed, "but your boys and your animals do something therapists can't. They meet people where they are, not where we think they should be." A pilot program was started. Veterans who had withdrawn from the world, who couldn't or wouldn't speak about their trauma, were brought to spend time with Ben, Marcus, Storm, and Luna. Not for therapy, just for connection. The results were remarkable. Men and women who hadn't spoken in months began signing with Ben. Veterans who couldn't sleep found peace lying beside Storm. Those who had lost their sense of purpose found it again in helping to care for Luna. One veteran, a woman named Captain Sarah Mitchell, who had lost her hearing in an IED explosion, bonded particularly with Ben. She had been struggling with sign language, frustrated by another form of communication that felt foreign. But Ben taught her his own version, the language he and Marcus had developed, part sign, part intuition, part Storm. "It's not about the words," she said in her first interview after months of silence. "Ben showed me it's about the intention behind the words. Storm and Luna, they don't care if you speak or sign or just sit quietly. They understand the language of the heart." Captain Mitchell ended up adopting one of the puppies from Storm's last litter. She was getting older now, and Rivera had suggested one more litter before retiring her from breeding. The puppy, trained by Ben and Marcus, became Mitchell's service dog, but more than that, became her bridge back to the world. The program expanded. Other families with gifted children reached out, sharing stories of kids who knew things they shouldn't know, who felt things others couldn't feel. A network formed, informal at first, then more organized. The Thompson family became inadvertent leaders of a movement recognizing different ways of knowing and being in the world. But fame and recognition brought challenges. There were skeptics who accused them of fraud, who demanded scientific proof of abilities that couldn't be measured in laboratories. There were people who wanted to exploit the boys' gifts for personal gain. There were those who saw Storm and Luna as mere animals to be studied, rather than family members to be respected. "Sometimes I wish we'd never stopped that day," Sarah confided to David after a particularly difficult encounter with a pushy researcher. "No, you don't," David replied. "Look at them." Marcus and Ben were in the backyard. Storm between them, Luna curled on Ben's lap. They were having one of their silent conversations, faces animated, hands moving, Storm's tail wagging at some shared joke only they understood. "They found each other," David continued. "They found their purpose." How many people can say that? As Storm aged, her rescues became less frequent, but no less important. She couldn't run as fast or search as long, but her ability to connect, to bridge, to understand remained undiminished. Luna began taking on more of the physical searching, while Storm provided the emotional center that held everything together. The day Storm collapsed was the day everything changed. It happened during a school presentation. Marcus was explaining how Storm had saved Robert Chen when the German Shepherd simply folded, her legs giving out, her breathing labored. Rivera was there within minutes. He'd become used to emergency calls from the Thompson family. His examination was gentle but thorough, his face grave. "She's had a stroke," he said quietly. "A small one, but she's 13 years old. She's lived a life that would have exhausted a younger dog." "But she'll be okay?" Marcus asked, though something in his expression suggested he already knew the answer. "We'll make her comfortable," Rivera said. "But Marcus, Ben, you need to prepare yourselves. Storm has given everything she has to give." They brought her home, setting up a bed in the living room where she could be part of everything. Luna rarely left her side, grooming her, bringing her toys, lying pressed against her as if trying to transfer her own wild strength. Ben signed something that broke everyone's hearts. "She's not scared. She's just tired. She says her work is almost done." "Almost?" Sarah asked. Marcus nodded, understanding. One more. She wants to do one more rescue. That's not possible, David said gently. She can barely walk. But Storm had never cared about possible. The call came 3 days later. A child with severe autism had locked himself in a panic room in his family's house during a meltdown. The room was designed to be impregnable. The father was a security consultant, and the boy had triggered the locks from inside. He'd been in there for 6 hours, and the parents were terrified he would hurt himself. We've tried everything, the mother sobbed over the phone. The fire department can't break in without terrifying him further. He won't respond to us. Please, we heard about what you do. Please help. Storm heard the conversation. Despite her weakness, she stood, swaying but determined. No, Sarah said. Storm, you can't. But the German Shepherd was already moving toward the door, each step an effort of will that was painful to watch. Ben signed, "She says this is why she stayed. This last one. This is important." They took her, Rivera coming along with his medical kit. The house was in chaos when they arrived. Fire trucks, police cars, neighbors gathered in concerned clusters. The panic room was in the basement, sealed tight, with only a small speaker system allowing communication. The boy inside, 9-year-old Timothy, hadn't made a sound in 2 hours. Storm, despite barely being able to stand, moved to the door. She sniffed, then did something she'd never done before. She howled. Not a bark or a whine, but a deep, mournful howl that seemed to come from somewhere ancient and primal. From inside the room came an answering sound. Not a howl, but a keen, high, and desperate. Storm howled again, and Timothy responded. Back and forth they went, a conversation in pure sound that transcended language. Marcus and Ben watched in amazement as something shifted in the air, some understanding being reached. Then Storm did the impossible. She stood on her hind legs, her paws against the door, and scratched a specific pattern. 3 scratches, pause, 2 scratches, pause, 1 scratch. From inside, Timothy repeated the pattern. Storm changed it. 2, 3, 1. Timothy matched it. For 10 minutes they played this game, Storm teaching and Timothy learning, until finally they heard the electronic locks disengage. The door opened and Timothy emerged, his face streaked with tears but calm. He went straight to Storm, who had collapsed from the effort, and lay down beside her, his arms around her neck. "She told me it was okay to come out," he said, the first words he'd spoken in months. "She said the world was scary, but there were good people who would help. She said she was tired and needed me to be brave so she could rest. They rushed Storm back to the clinic, but everyone knew. She'd given her last rescue everything she had left. She died that night, surrounded by her family. Marcus and Ben on either side, Luna pressed against her, Robert Chen playing Luna's lullaby softly on his guitar, Detective Santos and Doctor, Rivera and all the others whose lives she'd touched filling the room and spilling into the hallway. "She says thank you," Marcus whispered as Storm's breathing slowed. "She says she was just a scared dog on a highway, but we helped her become something more." Ben signed through his tears. "She says the work continues. Through us, through Luna, through everyone she's touched." Storm's last breath was peaceful, a soft sigh that seemed to release something into the room. Not an ending, but a transformation. The funeral was unlike anything the city had ever seen. Hundreds came, every person Storm had helped find or save, every family she'd reunited, every veteran she'd comforted, every child she'd understood. The mayor declared a day of mourning. The flag at City Hall flew at half-mast for a dog who had shown them all what love, without words, looked like. Luna spoke at the service, not with words, of course, but with a mournful cry that echoed across the cemetery, wild and free and full of grief. Then she did something extraordinary. She went to each person there, touching them briefly with her nose, as if carrying Storm's final message to each of them. When she reached Timothy, the boy from the panic room, she stopped. He knelt, and she climbed into his lap, and for a moment, everyone could see it. Storm's spirit, living on in the connection she'd created. The work did continue. Marcus and Ben, now known nationwide, established the Storm Foundation, dedicated to training people to recognize and develop intuitive connections with animals. Luna became the new bridge, though she worked differently than Storm. Wilder, less predictable, but no less effective. They found more lost souls. They saved more lives. They proved again and again that communication transcends words, that love transcends species, that sometimes the most profound truths come from simply listening with your whole being. 1 year after Storm's death, they received a package with no return address. Inside was a collar, not Storm's, but one that looked ancient, worn smooth by years of wear. Attached was a note. My grandmother had a gift. She could find lost things. Her dog, a German shepherd named Hope, was her partner. Hope's mother was named Faith, and her mother before that was Grace. Storm came from this line. The gift passes on, not through blood alone, but through bond. Your boys carry it now. Use it well. It was signed simply, a friend who understands. Marcus and Ben looked at each other, then at Luna, who was sniffing the collar with intense interest. Her tail began to wag, and she ran to the door, scratching urgently. Someone needs help, Marcus said. Ben nodded, already getting their rescue gear. As they headed out into another dark night, another search for another lost soul, Sarah watched from the doorway. The boys had grown, Marcus now 12, Ben 22. But the work that Storm had started would never end. There would always be someone lost, someone needing to be found, someone requiring a bridge between worlds. Thank you, she whispered to the night sky, to wherever Storm's spirit might be. Thank you for choosing us. In the distance, she could swear she heard an answering bark, carried on the wind like a promise. The work continues. Love endures. No one is ever truly lost as long as someone is willing to search. And search they would, for as long as there were lost souls in the world, the legacy of a German shepherd who had been shaking beside a busy road until a 5-year-old boy named Marcus had pressed his hand against a car window and changed everything. The story of Storm and her boys became legend, told in animal shelters and autism centers, in veterans' hospitals and police stations. But more than legend, it became proof. Proof that miracles come in many forms, that angels sometimes have 4 legs and fur, and that the purest love needs no words at all. It simply needs an open heart, willing hands, and the courage to stop when everyone else drives by. If this story touched your heart, if you felt the power of Storm's love and the boys' courage, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Like this video to help spread this message of hope and connection. Subscribe to our channel for more incredible true stories that will restore your faith in the bonds between humans and animals. And comment below. Have you ever experienced an unexplainable connection with an animal? We'd love to hear your story. Remember, sometimes the smallest acts of kindness, like stopping for a scared dog on a highway, can change not just one life, but countless lives. Thank you for watching, and remember, love speaks in many languages, and the heart understands them all.